analysis. One of the things we wanted to do is understand where visitors congregate in the park. It's a data set that I already have, and we're all used to hitting the Add Data button, and then we've got to browse through those folders to look for the data. But I'm actually trying to train myself on some better ways to locate data. One of those is to use the new catalog window that's embedded in ArcMap. You don't have to go ahead and start up our catalog. You don't have to browse folders nearly as much. So in a couple mouse clicks now, I just added the visitor hotspot analysis that I was looking for. So that just trimmed a few more seconds, not starting a separate application. So from this information, you can see that people congregate in the park in the lower valley and a few other locations like Hetch Hetchy Reservoir and a couple other places. How does that relate to search and rescue? Well, people need to be rescued where they are, and they congregate, but also in the backcountry when they get off by themselves and get into trouble. Well, let's analyze this data set. Where are those highest concentrations of search and rescues? To do that, we could go through the same processes we've been looking at or try something new. My colleague did the analysis, but I don't remember where she put the work, the results. So rather than contacting her, why don't I try the new search window? I can go ahead and type in the search characteristics that I'm looking for, search and rescue or SAR, and you'll find I discovered 23 data sets that represent that kind of data. Now that's way too much information for me to read, but I know the keywords of what I was looking for. I really wanted the hotspot analysis, and I wanted the layer file that had all the symbology pre-rendered. So just how we use search engines like Bing and Google, the same concepts can be applied to locate your spatial data sets now. So think about how many seconds that just trimmed off your workflow. If we go back to the problem, you can see where those concentrations are. They're in the lower valley, and then we also have this problem up near the reservoir. Now I started to talk about how this is related to cell phone coverage. So if we turn on our cell phone coverage map, what we'd like to do is now do a quick comparison and say, well, where do we have cell phone coverage? Does it overlap where we have these problems? The cell phone coverage is in pink and purple, and you see we've got great coverage in the valley and off to the east, but not up to the north around the reservoir. So what could we do in this area to improve the situation? Well, let's go ahead and zoom into this area. And one of the things that always happens to me is I never get my zooms quite right. So I'm always doing this. I'm always moving around the map. But I'm also trying to retrain myself now to use the keyboard shortcut that allows me to seamlessly roam around the map. So I'm not waiting for the map to redraw, but we're just using fast-paced maps to seamlessly update it as you navigate. So that should save me a few more seconds. Well, let's go back to the problem. If we're going to put in cell phone towers in this area, we've got a couple conflicts. We're supposed to be maintaining the park as wilderness. All this land is supposed to be wilderness. We're also trying to manage the aesthetic quality of the experience in the park. So we've got some data sets that are going to relate to that. And the one that's easy for everybody to understand are those scenic photo opportunities. The scenic overlooks where everybody goes and takes that single photo. So we're going to have to look at the aesthetic quality of these two locations. How do we do that analysis? Well, we typically go to our geoprocessing environment, and we've got a little tool here that does our classic viewshed, as well as incorporates some new skyline tools to look at what skylines we might want to protect. And I want to go ahead and execute this tool, but I want to do it a little bit different. I want to turn on an option for background geoprocessing. It's a big fancy word, but it basically means multitasking. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this tool, and if you watch the blue status bar in the lower part of the window, you'll see my model is running, but at the same time it runs, I can do other things. I can turn on the imagery over this area. I could use our new image analysis window and adjust the imagery to make it look a little nicer. I can add a little more contrast to the image. I could blend the transparency with the terrain model. So I'm doing two things at the same time, taking advantage of the compute power of my laptop and multitasking. When the analysis is done, you get a message, you get the results added back in, and we're ready to continue with our work. So if we take a closer look, the red areas show us all the areas that have direct line of sight, and the red outline are those areas that represent the skyline that we need to protect. Now the area we're focusing in on is the area up around Vernon Lake, where we've had lots of problems in the past. So let's go ahead and sketch in some new cell towers. Let's do a design of how we could improve this situation. So what we'd like to do is go ahead and start editing, and we end up with a template of all the things that we can edit. And I'd like to go in and say, let's put a new cell tower at this location up near the lake. But if we put a tower in, we also have to have a road to support it. So I'm going to do a little freehand sketching and say I want to put a road in that kind of follows this old trail that'll provide access to that tower. And just for the fun of it, let's try to improve coverage down near the reservoir. So we'll put in our second tower and sketch in that road. Once we have created these new features in the database, we're going to do the analysis to figure out, will it improve the problem? So one measure is, could we provide coverage to where we had all of those search and rescue operations last year? Could we turn those brown dots green? To do our analysis, we go back to our modeling environment. We're going to go ahead and run the model. And as this runs, it's figuring out the new cell phone coverage, but it's also calculating the costs. The cost to wilderness lands, to aesthetic quality, as well as figuring out what the benefits are going to be. Once it's complete, the measure of our success is, did those dots turn green? Most of them did, so we're providing better cell coverage. You can see our cell phone coverage map, but it came with a cost. That road and the buffer along the road are going to have to be declassified as wilderness if we follow this approach. So if we wanted to quantify just exactly what that cost is, this was a great opportunity to develop a custom little add-in. You heard about add-ins. You can develop them in .NET and in Java. You can install them literally by just double-clicking, and they get dropped right into your ArcMap environment. You don't have to have administrator privileges. And this little example helps us with some charting, some dynamic charting of the cost of this proposed design. So prior to our analysis, 38% of the people didn't have cell phone coverage. 74% of the search and rescue operations didn't have cell phone coverage. With our new proposed design, you'll see how those numbers change. Things get a lot better, but it came with a cost. The cost of the number of wilderness acres that are going to have to be delisted. So this gives you a quick tour. If you want to know how the story ends, take your cell phone to Yosemite and you can see if it works or if it doesn't work. Hopefully what I really left you with is the idea of 72 seconds. If we could just streamline our workflow by 72 seconds an hour, that's where you get your extra week of vacation. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Great tour there of some of the new capabilities in the platform. So if I'm a developer, I'm looking at that and thinking, that's a really fast map display. My users are always asking me to build solutions that draw the map faster. That's going to help me. Background geoprocessing, that's going to help me build more responsive applications. The modern user interface is always welcome, and I'll be able to plug into that nicely with add-ins. And editing templates. We saw how John was able to use an editing template on the desktop, and earlier this morning you saw editing templates being used to power the editing environment on the server. All these things will help me as a developer building a solution.